All right, Chris, you can go ahead.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining this session of the Chicagoland SharePoint Users Group. My name is Chris Barton. I'm a sales director here at Emtec, and I'm filling in for Mark Boat, who is delivering some on-site training. Welcome back from your Thanksgiving break, and welcome to the holiday season. It's going to be fun, I'm sure. Today's guest presenters are Ralph Rivas. We also have Perumal Chandramohan and Ofer Gal. And we've got a pretty packed session today in terms of an agenda. So I'm going to kind of jump right into it here and give you guys a quick overview. I'm going to give you a very brief update on some SharePoint news and events. Ralph is going to fill in for Mike Blumenthal and cover Office 365 news and events for us. And then we've got 3 demos, which should be exciting. So we've got Perumal, who will go over Microsoft Teams governance. Ofer has a demo of using SharePoint client ASP.NET Core on Linux. And then Ralph is going to give us an update and tour on MSGraph and some of the new features there. We also plan to wrap up the session with a survey of future topics for our user group. We try to keep things as SharePoint centric as possible, but if there are things on the kind of periphery of SharePoint or other topics you're interested in, we're very interested in hearing about that. So we can plan our sessions for 2019. And if timing permits, we will do bring your own problems. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right in here. First of all, just a shout out to all of those that attended it's actually the November 3rd and 10th app and Saturday morning sessions. Mark did a session on how to build an application using Power Apps on those 2 Saturdays, and it was well attended, some good feedback. We welcome your additional feedback for future sessions, and you can offer that to us via our LinkedIn group shown there. A few updates and events related to SharePoint. One thing kind of was pretty quick turnaround after SharePoint 2019 released in October. There's already a public update available. So if you've already started playing with or using SharePoint Server 2019, you might want to check out the link that I show here for the latest update that's available. It is cumulative update, and there's some fixes as well as some language independence that is established with that update. A new monthly kind of reoccurring topic that is going to be shared in the tech community is what's new and what's coming with SharePoint and OneDrive security, compliance, and administration. This was announced in the article that's linked here. So if you want to keep up with these areas, feel free to use this link. And I'm not sure how the tech community is going to show it going forward, but if you keep your eyes open, you should see future articles with this title. Okay, some events to update here. The SharePoint Fest in Chicago is December 3rd through 7th. You can click the link there or go to the link to get more information on that. There's also a live 365 event in Orlando, Florida, December 2nd through the 7th. And our next Chicagoland user group meeting is scheduled for December 12th at this point. With it being the holidays, we'd certainly welcome your feedback if you're not going to be able to attend, and we'll keep an eye on enrollment and registration, but there's a possibility that this date could change. Okay, and then also just a reminder to join our user group where you can keep up with all announcements from the group, including changes in schedule. Go to LinkedIn, join the group, and stay abreast of what's happening with this group. We also do some featured blog articles, and this month we have posted to the group a very popular recording that Mark did on how to upload pictures from your phone directly into SharePoint using Power Apps. And this is kind of surprising to us that this became such a high interest topic. So I think what's happening is people are clicking on this. They're seeing the value of how they can use this feature of Power Apps and Flow within their own environment. So you might want to check it out if you haven't already. All right, and that's it for updates and events related to SharePoint. Ralph, over to you.
Alrighty, so let me, I should get my screen here in just a moment. Hold on a second. I don't like this. Show my screen again. Does anyone see my picture, or are you seeing the presentation?
We see your picture. Thank you.
See my picture? Oh, so I'm showing the same screen that I showed earlier, right?
Mm-hmm. And you have some overlays as well.
A bit of Ray Charles thing going on over here, so you're hoping you're seeing what I can see or what I can't see. All right, let me go on to the initial part of the presentation over here. Stand by. Here we go. All right, so apologies to those who were looking forward to the great Michael Blumenthal to give this presentation, but looks like I'm the famous understudy for this particular thing, and I hope I do well by the audition. All right, coming up next. All right, so we're going to talk about a little bit Office 365 news and Office 365 upcoming events, see what's going on. So there's going to be some stuff over here. So here's something new, the concept of the background blur. There's like, oh, there's Michael looking good because there's nothing behind to distract you from his face. There we go. Background blur is something, if you have Teams, go check it out. Click on that little box there as you're beginning to come on. Not all tenants have it, but most of you should have it by now if you don't haven't checked it out by now. Very, very cool. Very nice for not having distractions. That's a big one. Teams, you can share, you can screen share without a call. So Skype, we could do this. We could always do this in Skype. Well, finally, Teams is catching up with Skype because, well, it's, I think they're supposed to have done that ages back, but here we are. They're able to do it. What else? So to-dos in Word. This is something new. Here's a bit of a link over here. Let's just say it'll take a while for us to explain it. So here is the link. You will have this recording at some point, but if you guys are fast enough, you could potentially copy it. But otherwise, it's keep track of to-dos with the new AI features in Words. AI is getting much better, and of course, you have the cloud, so sky's the limit. All right, SharePoint gets location fields. This is actually pretty cool. Location fields are like, you remember like if you have something like a Google map or one of those kind of things, and you, instead of having those crazy coordinates that you see on the actual field, you actually get something that actually is something. It's a location, a true location, just pretty much like what we do in other web parts and other embeds and stuff. This used to be something you had to program. Now it's out of the box. Nice. Other things, there's some Ignite. That was basically, that came out of Ignite. So a lot of this stuff we knew was coming, but pretty much it's there for people to see. Let's look at some upcoming events. So we already talked about SharePoint Fest. SharePoint Fest, and there's going to be like a user, Michael's user group is going to be meeting over there, and they have a special that on the day of the user group, and over here is the details on how to get to that. There's a free expo pass for at 2 p.m. just to come to the expo if you come in that day of the meeting. That's actually pretty cool because that actually costs money to have to get. They're letting you come in and be, let's just have people sell you stuff for free. Big deal? It actually is a big deal because that means you can get the swag. And the swag basically pays for any of your time that you need to get out there. And of course, you're going to meet people, which is great. And somebody not hemming right now might be bringing flan to bribe one of the speakers to come back to the SharePoint Saturday. All right. Other things over here. There's the pass. There's the link that's right over there. We're going to try to share. I imagine we're going to try to share these links or just the slides later on so people can get to it. All right, and that is the end of this show for the Office 365 updates. So I turn it back over.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to our first demo with Perumal. So give me 1 second. Perumal, you can go ahead and take yourself off mute, and I'll make you the presenter.
Okay.
Okay. You should have the ability to go ahead and share your screen. Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay. Is it clear?
Yeah, we can see your screen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, good morning. Governance is not about limiting the freedom. The point here is how we are going to manage Microsoft Teams in a compliant fashion without affecting the user's day-to-day productivity. I am Perumal Chandramohan, co-founder of JiJi Technologies and an Office 365 MVP. Today, I am going to present you with various controls available in Office 365 to better govern teams. First thing you need to understand and keep in mind that Office 365 Teams is built on top of Office 365 Groups. And Office 365 Groups is built using SharePoint Online, Exchange Online, and Azure AD. So to govern Microsoft Teams, we are going to use the controls available in Azure AD and Office 365 Groups. For example, to enable the guest access in Microsoft Teams, we need to enable the guest access in Azure AD first, and then on Office 365 Groups, and finally on Microsoft Teams. So keep in mind that Microsoft Teams is built on top of Office 365 Groups. By default, everyone in your organization can create groups. If you block the group creation altogether, it will affect the collaboration among your employees. So as a balanced point and according to your organization need, you need to find a set of users who alone can create the Office 365 groups. And you can assign the permission for that group alone to create the Office 365 groups. You can easily do that using the dynamic security groups available in Azure AD. So first you need to create a dynamic security group in Azure AD and create a group for example, you may want to provide permission only for managers alone to create groups, or all the full-time employees can create the groups, whatever it can be. So create a dynamic security group for those set of users alone. And then we need to going to assign the permission for them. So creating a dynamic security group in Azure AD is a straightforward method and an easy one, but blocking the group creation permission and assigning it to a set of users, we need to depend on the PowerShell. So this is the script we need to use. So in this script, we just need to replace with the name of your dynamic security group here. Let me explain what we have done in this group. So this script uses Azure AD Preview PowerShell module. So all the Office 365 group policy settings are stored as a direct settings object in Azure AD. So what we are doing is that as a first step, we just retrieve that direct settings object from Azure AD and disable the group creation. In the second step, what I am doing is that I am mentioning that this dynamic security group alone can create the group creation. That's all. We are done. So once you do that, only the members of that security group alone can create the Office 365 groups. Now you have restricted the users for the group creation. Whether we are all done? No. Still you need to monitor whether all the actively created teams are used actively or it is just dormant. There are three ways to do this. By setting the group expiration policy in Azure AD and checking for inactive teams in Office 365 tenant and checking for teams without any owners in Office 365 tenant. So in this screen, in the left side, you can see the group expiration policy in the Azure AD, where I have set 180 days as the default expiration for my Office 365 groups or teams. So in the right side, you can see the Teams window with some notifications for the owners. So before 30 days of the team expiration, the team owner will receive the notification saying that this group is going to expire in these many days and with an option to renew it. If the owner renews it, then the group will be good for another 180 days. Else, it will get deleted automatically after 180 days. So it is one way of reminding the team owners of maintaining the team or not. So checking for the inactive teams. Actually, it is difficult to define what inactiveness means, since there are some teams where only the team channel conversations alone happen without any file folder activities. But there are some Office 365 groups where they solely using the group only for the document storage purpose alone. Still, there are some Office 365 groups who uses for mail conversations alone. So it is difficult to define what inactiveness means. But there is a nice script available in Technique Gallery. You can download and use it. This script will check for inactiveness in terms of team channel conversation or file folder activities in SharePoint Online and mail activities in Exchange Online. So finally, the third one, the teams without owners. As a best practice, it is always better to assign 2 owners for a team. And then there are 2 ways to check for teams without any owners. One from the Teams Admin Center, but in the Teams Admin Center, the UA is not going to be a user-friendly one. So we again need to depend on the PowerShell script. Don't worry, all the scripts that I have mentioned in the presentation are available as a blog, and the URL for that blog is available at the end of the presentation. You can make a note of that later. So this is the script to get all the teams without any owners. So this script uses the Microsoft Teams PowerShell module. As a first step, I am retrieving all the teams available in my Office 365 group, Office 365 tenant, and then I am checking for each team's owners. If there is no owner present, then I am going to append that team name to a CSV file. At the end of running this script, you will receive a CSV file with the list of all teams without any owners. Now you have a free list. What you can do with this list is that you can contact the team members to nominate any owner. If you are not getting any proper response from the team members, you can just go ahead and archive and delete the team. So here comes the important part, the guest access in Teams. As an administrator, we always want to keep a track of which are the teams enabled for guest access and who the guests are. The main reason is that there are some confidential information that you don't want to leak it to the external guest. That may be the important thing we usually do for guest access. So as a first step, we want to know which are the teams enabled for guest access and who those guests are. Again, we are going to do the same thing with the PowerShell script. And here also we are using the same Teams PowerShell module. So as a first step, I am retrieving all the teams in my Office 365 tenant, and then I am querying for team members with the guest role alone, and I am appending it as CSV file. So as in the earlier script, similar here also, you will receive a CSV file with all the team with its guest users details. That's all. And this is the Teams organization-wide policy available in Teams Admin Center, where you can define the guest experience in Teams. Okay, now we have an important task. As administrators, we might come across scenarios where we want to block the guest access entirely for some confidential projects. How we can do that? Here comes the Teams classifications handy. So by default, the Teams classifications will be empty. And due to this, whenever you create any team or Office 365 groups, you won't be provided with any option. And also adding a classification does not make any effect apart from in the UA, you will be shown with the what the classification type is. That's all. But once you set the classification, what you can do is that later you can scan for all the confidential project teams, and you can tweak the guest access policies or meeting and the messaging policies, whatever you want. So in our case, we want to block the guest access for all the confidential projects. It is going to be a two-step process. First, I need to add the classification set to my Office 365 tenant. Then I need to tweak the guest access policies. So the first step. So to do this, there is no UA to do this. To add the classification types, we need to again depend on the PowerShell script. Here also I am going to use the same Azure AD Preview PowerShell module, and we are going to use the directory settings object. In the directory settings object, I am setting three classification types: internal, external, and confidential. And I have made internal as the default classification type. So once we complete running this script, whenever I create a new team, I will be shown with an option to set the classification, and the internal will be set as the default one. So all the teams that are created yearly we'll have the classification type set as internal. For whatever one we create new, the options will be shown for the owner to select one. And this option going to be a mandatory one. So users or the owners need to select some classification when they create a team. Now we have created the team, created the classifications. Now the second part, we need to scan for all the confidential teams. So this script will help you on that part. So as a first step, I am retrieving all the confidential teams. And then in the second step, I am just disabling the guest access for all the confidential teams. That's all. And these are the new team admin roles announced during Ignite, which you can use it for in your project. In the interest of time, I have not covered everything. There are still few items like returns and policies which I have not covered here. But I have blocked everything in detail and it is available in this URL, whatever the URL I have shown in this blog, in this presentation slide. You can go through that and check. If you have any questions, you can post the reply there, or you can contact me through Twitter or email. I hope I have provided you some controls, introduced you with some controls available to better govern Microsoft Teams. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Perumal, thank you very much for the demo. There's a few questions that have come in while you were speaking. Edie, do you have the questions ready?
Yep. So can dynamic security group be created just for guests?
Honestly, I don't know. I have not tried with the guest. I think it is not possible with the guest. The reason is that for dynamic security groups, the group itself is based on some attribute in Azure AD. So I need to try it. To my knowledge now, it is not possible for guest.
Okay.
Okay, and so there's another couple questions. And Naveen, did that answer your question for you? Let me know if you've got any follow-ups to that. Another question came in. When groups expire, do the files expire along with it, or are they still accessible after it expires in SharePoint? Can they get to the files on SharePoint?
No, when the group expires, everything will expire. The files and everything will go.
Perfect.
Perumal, thank you. This, I can just see that the administration and the governance of teams is just a whole other thing that now has to be managed. We use them internally within our company as well, and I can see that just after a while, there's going to obviously be teams that may not necessarily be needed anymore, but potentially the files are still needed. So appreciate the code. I'm sure the users, the user group members will be very happy to see the code so they don't have to write it themselves. So thank you.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to move on to our next demo, and our next user group member, Ofer, is going to kindly show us SharePoint Client ASP.NET Core on Linux. So Ofer, I'm going to go ahead and transfer this over to you.
Thank you. You guys see it?
Not yet. Oh, there we go. Thank you. I see the
Okay.
presentation in a tiny window.
That's all. Okay.
Perfect.
Very, very big, right?
Looks great.
Okay. Only note on the source code. You have the source code and you will somehow present it. But if anybody really wants it, they can email me at ofergal@gmail.com and I'll send it to you. So why are we talking about this? Linux is getting momentum, even in the Azure workspace. There is a blog post or something like that that it dominates Azure. So if you want to go there, you can see that. cloud providers offer Linux variation as virtual machines or containers or anything like that. And by using REST to talk to SharePoint, it's very universal, and you can do wonders with that against SharePoint, against other things, combine the two, and more than that. There's also some 365 API and many other systems. The graph, the famous graph API, is presented like REST, and there are many tools like Postman and others that you can train the REST calls and see what you want to do with that. Another good thing is that VS Code works fine in Linux. I shouldn't say totally fine. Sometimes it goes away and you have to restart the machine. But it's getting there. It's a good tool. And then you have .NET Core that works in Linux also, and that's why we have this presentation. But just mind you, .NET Core is not the only way to get the same results. You can do REST with other platforms like Node.js and really any other system that works on Linux or not. And then we have a way to develop on Linux by using .NET Core, command line interface, and VS Code. I chose C, forgot the name of it, CentOS, which is something out of the other big guy, which I forgot now. But it could run on almost any distro of Linux. You can go to this link and it will show you how to install the .NET Core, and then you do .NET New console and it will create a new project. You can do a .NET New Web API if you want to make a web API that will talk to SharePoint. And then .NET Add Package, REST Sharp will add the REST Sharp nugget that if anybody saw my September show, we showed how we use it to talk to SharePoint. And then .NET Run runs the project after, of course, you edited the files, and I will show it. Again, all the command line interface commands are in this link, and and how to install VS Code. There's another link here, and you can also use VS Code to debug almost like Visual Studio. So that scenario is basically allowing you to work on Linux without Windows and just having SharePoint in the same network or in Office 365. Another way that you're going to see at the end did not work for me is to do Visual Studio application or a project with .NET Core application and add REST Sharp NuGet and edit the files. The files are also included. And then you can test locally, and that, of course, works in Windows. And when you publish, you have to create a profile that the target is Linux x64, and there are two ways to do it: framework dependent if you have other .NET Core application in the same Linux, or you can do a self-contained, so everything is in one package. You publish the profile, you copy the content to the Linux machine, open a terminal, and do .NET on the DLL now. Or if you have self-contained, you can just run the like this, / and the name of the DLL. Now I got this error, and I thought, but in the 2 weeks that I had to prepare for this, I would figure it out, but I didn't. So if you're better than me, you probably will figure it out. So let's go and see how it's looking on Linux. Let's take this out of the way. As you can see, we're in, by the way, anybody sees me or sees my screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay. So, like I said in the presentation, you make a directory, you go to it, you do .NET new console, and it will create a package, or I'm sorry, a project. And then you do .NET add package, rest sharp, that will bring up the NuGet. I had to change the version in here because the latest version didn't work for me. It could be that the latest version will work for you when you get the latest. But anyway, the code is fairly simple. We go to this, and it's the same code that we ran in Windows. Very simple. This is how you get authenticated, and it is NTLM, and it could be that the other problem, we'll talk about it later. So we have basically just two files, and then in order to run it, you go on a terminal and do the .NET run, and it should run. Basically just showing all the customer names. There you go. So this guy connected to SharePoint, which is running on a different machine altogether, and we have success, so to speak. Now, in Visual Studio, let me make it bigger. As you can see, the code is exactly the same code. The big difference is when you go to publish, I'm sorry, publish, oh, come on. The configuration is, I call it self-contained. The target framework is .NET Core 2.1. Deployment mode is self-contained. And this is the most important thing. It should be Linux 64. And then it creates the files. You bring the files over to Linux. And I can just tell you that it doesn't work. But the idea is that you will be able to run it just by doing something like that with the name of the application. So, any questions? That's all I have.
There is a question that came in, Ofer. Can we do a file sync and all other regular SharePoint Windows things on Linux?
I'll share that. I don't know, but you can just open a browser, Firefox here. Come on, Firefox. And go against SharePoint. I mean, the network is the same network as Windows or anything else. So if you have a SharePoint location, you can get to it. Here, I'll do SP19. Home. Let's make it. And here's my SharePoint. And here's the customer list that we queried with the REST API.
An additional follow-up question to that, is that file sync like the OneDrive files to your local drive, as in a Linux disk?
No, I don't think. Maybe there is a way for that, but I'm not aware of it.
Perfect. For those two that asked those questions, does that kind of sum things up for you? Just let us know, or if you've got follow-ups, we'll be happy to ask.
Yeah, sure.
Ofer, thank you. And there's obviously some source code and things that Ofer is offering, so we'll be loading all of that up. This way you guys can access that. So stay tuned. Everything will be put onto the user group on LinkedIn. So if you're not already currently a member, go ahead and get yourself logged in there, so that this way you'll be able to download that information. All right, so we are moving on to Ralph for our next demo. Thank you, Ofer. And Ralph, if you want to go ahead and take yourself off mute there. I can see your screen. It's your file area. And you are still on mute.
Yes, so every time you shrink something, something else goes up. It's showing an app and shouldn't be. It should be showing.
Looking at your OneDrive right now.
Monitor 3.
Lots of monitors. All right. So
back in business?
I see black screen. Yep, package solution.
All right. So really quick, originally we were going to try to do an MSGraph like end-to-end sort of like demo. The big problem was like how to fit it in just a very short period of time. The problem with the demo is like we'll show you, well, here it is working, but there's so many moving parts to some of the pieces, or rather the moving parts are important to underscore. Otherwise you're going to think, oh, that's really easy, anyone can do it. Well, not quite. You have to understand the bits before you just simply do it. I'll give you the main reason why. So if you think about it, what is MSGraph after all? MSGraph is looking at everything, all your data that Microsoft has about you and about everyone else. If it's easy to get that information, then you might as well be Facebook and give away your stuff to that company that we don't want to talk about. It can't be that easy. There has to be some sort of, let's just say, way to get at it that provides, let's just say, forced governance. In other words, you can make it really easy, but you should not make it that easy. You should also allow for security and everything else to go through. So that's my little reason why we don't have a quick, short demo on it. And then the next thing I have, of course, is the fact that my developer tenant decided to expire just yesterday. Thank you. So I had to set all that stuff up from scratch, and I didn't exactly have time to complete it. A lot of this stuff has to be set up from scratch. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff when you set it up from scratch takes a while to get through. You have to pay attention to it, and there's no real way to script it, which is why that example we were looking at earlier with Linux and containers is actually something that the whole point of that, if you can imagine, is to quickly onboard someone like the developer where they have an environment that's up and running, ready to go fast. That is becoming the new mantra. Basically, get up, get going, get productive immediately. Because if you're going to follow all Microsoft steps, the tutorials, it will take hours to make it happen and to wait for things to update, say, in either on the cloud or wherever else. So just even setting up a subscription and getting all that stuff done. As you can see, I basically revived another one that I had created for another demo. So I revived that guy. That took a while. And of course, now I have to set up, of course, the SharePoint to work online, which means making sure that you have your app catalog all ready to go, making sure that you set up your PowerShell to allow CDNs, things like that. And of course, in the case of Graph over here, to set up properties, which I have yet to set up. It's actually mostly set up, but we'll get through that in just a little bit. All right, so just a real quick review on what's going on the SPFx in the dev world. And maybe I have a good, actually, here's a nice little blog. This is the one, if you guys are not following Andrew Connell, you guys are not doing SharePoint development. You're not. Sorry, but simple as that. He has to be on your list, as much as the SIGs and the meetings with Vesa and company, with either Elios from Velo, or Waldeck from Rencor. Those are like the top three. There's other guys, Stephen Bauer and all the rest. There's certain names that essentially are very important, and this is one major one. What came out? 1.7 came out. What's the huge deal here? Here's a big deal about this. In 1.7, when it came out, it broke my stuff. So I thought that maybe I could use my own, just say my own bits to make this work. And it turns out it only works with Node 8.0. I'm doing work with other development patterns, and I get Node 10.0, and it gives me a nice, nasty message that says, sorry, everything you're trying to do needs an older version of Node. Then I try to put NVM, and of course, we're blocking NVM. Your company might be doing the same thing because they're following a standard policy. The NVM is something that you use to do node versions. It's one of the tools. Containers is another, or like what I do really, in my original cheating way, which is to open up and create a VM in my portal, Azure portal. So like, for example, I have this now. I just created today. This is a remote connection to a VM I just created today, and I ran through all the steps to put in all the bits, just installed the version of Node that I wanted specifically. And yes, the version of Node you want specifically. Like this right here. You have to literally go into the distribution and select this version, 8.4, because any later than that will not work with the SharePoint framework at the moment. This is something that I do want to mention absolutely here in this user group, because if you're doing this stuff, please do not get alarmed. Make sure you get this. Now, this is why you don't develop on your own machine. All kinds of stuff can go on. It's much easier to have a VM or a container that you can have prepackaged or packaged for the particular version of all the things you need ready to go. So that's a key piece that I had to get going over here. What else was over here? Other things is SharePoint Online Management Shell. I had to make sure that was all in. So I got myself all set up. Let's go back for a moment to our 1.7 framework. Other things about the 1.7 framework, other than breaking a few things, not so much the break piece over here, but they talk about this concept of working now with teams. So, for example, when you create a new solution, and check this out right over here, we'll actually do one. Let me go ahead and open up a brand new, and you'll see it. Because this would have been part of the demo anyway, you would have seen it going. And let's go open up another emulator. Let's go cd dev, make directory try me. CD try. I didn't have to go there, but let me just do it. Let me go. Hey, will it remember my previous things? No, it doesn't. Not yet. Okay, so Yeoman is the way. If you guys are not sure about how this stuff works, be sure to go through the tutorials. Microsoft has SharePoint. Okay, we're not going to go run through the whole thing over here. I could have done a skip install so it can be quick, but for now I just wanted to use these menus. So let's find the solution name is Try Me, and now you'll take a look over here. We have this SharePoint 2019 and onwards, including SharePoint Online, SharePoint 2016. Here's the difference. This will give you 2016 will give you 1.4 at most, or 1.3x, I should say. Sorry, at most. That works on SharePoint Online and SharePoint 2019. This one 2019 will give you 1.4x at most, but guess what? Not any later. If you want to use the stuff that's in this latest framework, it has to be SharePoint Online only. It's another important thing to learn. Use current folder, fine, that's okay. Okay, you guys remember seeing this one? Deploy to tenant, tenant-wide, which means immediately install it to everybody. We say yes or no to that. We already have seen that before. Just going to say yes to that for now. But here's something new. Will the components of your solution require permissions to access web APIs that are unique and not shared? This is actually a very important question. If you think about it, one of the big things that that they were talking about for a long time that now is in 1.7 is the ability to not like go rigmarole code just to be able to connect to web APIs of other things. Say your company has REST APIs. Say you want to connect to SAP. You want to do any of the other stuff. Well, you had to do rigmarole code to do that. Well, that's all now native to the framework. But you have to say whether or not you're just going to say willy-nilly give access to everything, or will you essentially control it down to the last bit. Controlling it to the last bit is usually the way to go. So this is the case where, like, no, it's a default. As you can see, N capitalized. Left up, all right? So, and then you would continue. You'd have your part, and it's hello world, and let it go. And pick your framework and let it go. And everything's the same. Some of this stuff looks a little bit different, but I'll just go ahead and let that guy run for now. But I wanted to make sure to show you that important piece that's going in there in 1.7. What else can 1.7 do? So you remember we have web parts and we have extensions. We have a new part. It's part of the what's called the plus beta, which has been introduced a while ago. We talked about it. Well, we didn't go into it in detail, but that's the concept of adding things that are sort of like, let's just say they don't want people to do it necessarily automatically because they are going to be changing it. So that's what the plus beta is all about, right? But the concept over here is now you can do stuff for teams. Check it out. A new folder will come up that's created over here with the plus beta. It'll create basically a Teams folder with a manifest. So this is why you can now run your SharePoint web apps, your web parts and everything else side by side in Teams. Maybe that should be our demo next month because that's actually really, really cool. And the concept is now you've immediately become a Teams developer. Well, you always were, but you didn't know it until now. All right, what else are in here? The concept of the apps, because of the team tabs, you have the concept of apps. Remember, we have web parts that are just simply parts of the pages, and well, that would be something like this. Let's go look at one. Let's go over here. So in my test page, there's our web part, for example, and let's see, I added the web part more than once. Imagine if this whole page was your app. You've taken over the entire page. That is what's coming. And right now, they had to sort of like semi-turn that off. They turned it on, they found a problem, they turned it off. So we can't see it right now, but that is going to be there, absolutely. It's one of the highest requested things, and one of the reasons why people literally will do a lot of heavy development, and especially do what's called the provider-hosted app development, just to basically share stuff inside of it. So that's
hey, Mark, have they said when they're going to release that?
They were supposed to. They were supposed to release it. It broke. They took it back.
Okay.
They can do that, right? So all go in there and update the code. Remember, this stuff is all npm install, comes from somewhere, so it's easy for them to, in essence, switch on, switch off. Really cool. If you're developing for real in something else, think about those concepts, the so-called 12-factor and everything else. But I digress because that's a whole other topic. Let's go back for just a moment here. Or the other pieces, other things like domain isolated web parts. You can actually go through the list and see they explain it. Client list subscriptions is actually really cool. Here's the concept. You remember like when you change your document in say a document in Word and you're in Office Online, and as you're typing, you can see someone else and then their changes happen like almost immediately. It happens in OneNote, it happens all the rest. Well, imagine now the SharePoint list updating almost live as you're putting it in. So someone puts something in the list, or someone changes a property on the list, and your list actually updates. Holy cool. That is cool. Very cool. And they're using Socket.io to make it happy, to make it happen and happy. Here we go. All right, so that is the updates on that. So let's go back to Graph for just a little bit.
Hey, Ralph, we have a couple minutes because I think there's a few things we need to get through. But just to remind everybody, chat, if you go to the chat section on the right-hand side on your screen, Edie did put the link in for Andrew Connell's blogs. This way you guys can grab that from as well to be able to access it. Yes. So if you're learning Graph, hold on a second, where'd it go? Hey, come back here. It disappeared. It literally dragged and dropped and disappeared into something. Hold on a second. Let's find out why that disappeared completely. There it is. Okay, so you go to Graph, and let me go back a step over here so you can see where this came from. The developer blogs, and you have your starting point. You have lessons on how everything works. This is your most important. If you're going to learn Graph, you really want to be very familiar with this, because even though you're doing something maybe in SharePoint or wherever else, you have to understand how Graph works in a native fashion. Because all it is just, if you can imagine, just calls queries. So let's, for example, look at, this is an example where I'm not signed in. I'm just using the sample account, all right, where it actually brings in a photo. All right, now watch it sign in as me. Let me do it myself. Okay, go ahead. I'm signing in. Oh, really? Okay, I changed it, I guess. Thank you for being so persistent. Yeah, I guess I was not here for a while. All right, so let's look at my photo here. But that now, this is just so you know it's not smoke and mirrors. It actually works. So I can look at items in my drive. What drive am I talking about? My OneDrive. Here's my items in my OneDrive. My demo that was going to work today, had everything been properly configured or permissioned, was to actually bring in this information. But if you can see, the reason why this is possible, because guess what? This is what you get back. So whether or not you use the code that's here or whether you do roll your own, this is what you're going to get back, this kind of information. It's very, very powerful. So let's go take a quick look at a review of some of the pieces over here. Some of the pieces involved when doing Graph, and then we'll probably show a full one at one time. When you're actually bringing in Graph, in your main web part area, you'll be bringing in the Graph client. You'll be bringing in the TypeScript pieces of the client so that you can actually do some dev with it, all right? What else would you probably be bringing in? Let's see. Actually, yeah, those are the two key things. Basically, the Graph and the client are the two things you want to bring in, plus the TypeScript. All right. The other things that you look in the client, so actually calling it looks like this. Right, so if you bring it in, you're just basically getting context. You're just calling up the MSGraph factory. You're getting the client. When you have your client, you can now do something with the client, and you can give it context. The client can have concept. This /me is a shorthand. Remember those URLs we saw over there? Is a shorthand that says just get my stuff. That means whoever's logged in, they're going to see their stuff. If I want it to be someone else explicitly, then I have to do something different. But that's a really cool concept. You can actually look at other people's stuff. All right, and now in this case, we're just making sure we're getting the user, and it works. And then we can start handling the responses over here. The rest of that code that I would have shown would have been stuck in here. However, I like their example online. They go all this way, and then they tell you, oh, be sure you have access. And then they just give you a link, and they don't tell you exactly what you do over there to be able to get access. They don't tell you that you needed to go to your package solution, and you needed to go and add your API permissions, and you had to specify the resource, and you had to do something like user read all or group read all, depending on what context you're doing in. And of course, that's not really explained, is it? That's not helpful either. Well, okay, great, but it is explained. They actually talk about it. But they in the help file, if you follow along in the same area as the tutorial, they will actually walk you through setting up your information in AD. The concept is you're in your enterprise applications over here. This is Active Directory. This is Azure. That's right. Azure is pretty much a part of what you need to have. So you need to have it. So here's your Azure.
you would basically find your application, say I'm looking for Microsoft application. So I'm going to look for Graph. Hey, where's Graph? Come find me. Yep, there we go. We got Graph. Here's a Graph. And we go into our permissions or setting, properties, sorry. And then we get things like this where we can get now the tokens. And those tokens will be involved essentially if you're trying to do things, let's just say specific to that service. All right, so that's the other part. This is the part that they said if this is not done, if you make sure, if this does not exist or if it's turned off for whatever reason, enable users to sign in. That's set to know. You got to double check if you have more than one chef in the soup. Double check that these things are set up properly. Have to be checked.
Hi, Ralph.
Yep,
Ralph,
that's it.
It looks like Tom had a question.
Go ahead.
Tom, you're unmuted.
Sorry, that was a mistake.
Hands
Yep.
raised, all excited.
Very cool, though.
Yes. Go ahead.
No, yeah, it was a mistake. His hand was raised, but it was so Ralph, I'm gonna have to wrap you up. I have a question for you about the demo or any of the code or anything that you showed. You mentioned that there was a place where you could see all of this. Is that part of the presentation or a link that we can provide to the users?
In fact, that is part of the presentation, and let me finally show it to you. Guess what? The same place you went for your SharePoint framework, you're getting started, your first web part and all that stuff. This used to be small. Look at all the stuff they got now. And that includes here, connect to APIs, connecting SharePoint, connecting to Graph, connecting to API secured by AD. All of these have been updated to the latest version of the framework. Now, technically speaking, 1.6 is pretty much the latest where things have changed significantly. 1.7 didn't change that much, except for those changes I talked about. And the very big thing that they wanted to change, they had to pull it back. So no big deal. So these videos are based on 1.6, which came out in September. All right. They expect these to change or be updated in some small way come January. But this, again, should be your #1 site, docs.microsoft.com/enus/SharePoint or whatever country you're in.
Thanks.
All right?
Thanks
This is the
so much.
sharing. Yeah.
All right, so we have a couple of minutes left. You know, we obviously have not gotten to BYOP. One of the things I do want to stress, though, that's one of the main reasons for the user group as well, right? The user group isn't there just for us to kind of post the next user group meetings. Feel free to use that group to pose questions on the fly if you guys are having problems while you're working on a day-to-day basis in SharePoint. Pull from the user base. Get your questions answered. So feel free to post any questions or challenges on the actual user group, and your fellow group members will come to your rescue. We do have a quick poll to go through today. We're trying to think about what would be the best from a topics perspective for next year, because we're going to go ahead and start planning the process for all of those. And let me share my screen here. Give me 1 second. And let me know if you can see the poll.
Looks good, Dina.
Thank you. So there is so many different topics that we could potentially talk about next year. These are just a few that came to mind that we have gone over in the last year, but please feel free to go ahead and input your response on the poll, because it'll be very helpful when Mark gets back. We can go ahead and start talking through those. The other piece that you could do is post on our LinkedIn group. You know what, guys? We'd really love to hear about X in one of our user group sessions. This will help us guide what we're doing in the upcoming year. And if you have demos or you're doing something internally within your organization that you feel like is something really cool that people could benefit from, welcome you to go ahead and share that with the group. So looks like we've gotten, all right, people are still voting. So I'll give you guys 2 seconds to finish voting here, and then we'll go ahead and close this out. And if you haven't done so, it's changing. I'm going to close it. All right. Poll is now closed. a lot of people want Power Apps and Teams. Very interesting. There's actually a good smattering of all different things here. So wonderful. I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully this is working. And you're seeing my screen. So at this point, because I don't want to take away from the rest of your guys' day, we want to thank you guys for attending the session. If we do have changes to our December session, we'll definitely let you guys know shortly. And probably by tomorrow morning, we'll have the recording and everything else up for you guys to download the pieces from today's session. So thank you to all of the user group members who've presented today. We really appreciate it. And have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.